To the dive. I've been away since my YouTube channel with 300,000 subscribers was banned, but that's really not a surprise to me, or I think anyone who understands what this government is doing to truth tellers like Julian Assange, for example. So I'm happy to be back now to discuss really pressing issues such as the situation in Russia and the unfolding situation in Israel and Gaza, with none other than our incredible guest for today, former UN weapons inspector and U.S. Marine, Scott Ritter. Scott, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, look, I want to touch on all these subjects and everything that's developing in this multipolar world that's taking shape. But your comments and your commentary on the situation in Gaza, I've found to be really insightful. And I first want to discuss something that you wrote on your website, Scott Ritter Extra. You said, "I no longer stand with Israel." Can you talk about that and briefly, or not briefly, just go into full detail, why you no longer, I guess, stand with Israel?
Well, I mean, look, I have to admit to my deficiencies as a human being, I guess. And that doesn't mean that I'm deficient for supporting Israel. I spent a lot of time in Israel. From 1994 to 1998, I was the lead liaison between the United Nations Special Commission and Israeli intelligence on issues of great sensitivity regarding Iraqi weapons of mass destruction. And I traveled to Israel frequently, and I fell in love with Israel. I mean, I love the Israeli people. How can you not? They are well educated. They're like Americans with funny accents, and many of them have better American accents than Americans do because they are Americans. But I fell in love with the country. I fell in love with the history. I'm a historian. I'm not overly religious, but you cannot but reflect on the Bible, on the Quran, on the Torah, because you're there where it happened, where everything that's written about in the Bible happened right there in the Holy Land. And it was just fascinating to see that. And I was also in love with the resilience of the Israeli people, because when I was there from 1994 to 1998, virtually every time I visited, a horrific terrorist act took place. Hamas was blowing up buses, blowing up restaurants. And what I saw wasn't the people that let it break them down. I mean, how it could break you down. I mean, to wake up every morning to have a bus blown up. Buses were blowing up 100 yards from my hotel. A restaurant that I ate in the day before got blown up the next day. It was just a roll of the dice that I wasn't, one of these victims. And so I saw these people pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and get on with life. But it wasn't getting on with life with revenge. They wanted peace. They recognized what Hamas was doing. Hamas was trying to undermine the Oslo Accords. Oslo I, Oslo II was put in motion by Yitzhak Rabin, a prime minister who was a warrior, a man who had gone to war against Palestine, who now realized that the only future for Israel, the only future, was a path of peace where Palestine and Israel coexisted side by side as equals. And he was working in that direction. It was a difficult struggle, but he's working. He was killed while I was there too. I was in Israel the day he was assassinated. And it hurt me as much as it hurt the Israelis, because I truly had bought into this notion of, Israel working towards peace with the Palestinians. I stopped traveling to Israel in 1998. Benjamin Netanyahu was the prime minister. And I watched Israel do a flip on everything they claimed to stand for regarding the Palestinians. But, out of sight, out of mind is what they say. I left and I got involved in different things. I was trying to stop a war in Iraq, and then I was involved in trying to educate people about the reality of the Iranian nuclear program. And lately I've been doing the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. It's a full-time job. So when this Gaza event exploded, it wasn't as though I had been sitting there following this stuff. I had peripherally, but it wasn't. And my initial inclination was going back to my roots. I like Israel, and I still do. I love the Israeli people, and I still do. But I can't sit there and watch what's happening to Gaza. I'm not condoning Hamas. Guys, if you're not listening to me, they tried to kill me, not me personally, but I could have died. I was close to these things when they blew up. They don't care. They're indifferent. They just want to bring death and destruction. So I condemn Hamas with all of my heart, But the Palestinian people, how can you condemn them? And then you start digging into what's going on. Was this really what they called, this deliberate act of terrorism? Or was this a prison break? Was Hamas tired of, for 75 years, living in an open air concentration camp, being bullied? And the more you dig, the worse the answers get. Mm-hmm. And that happened to me. I started digging and digging and digging because I want to like the Israelis. I want to support the Israelis. I've been standing with them this entire time. The Gulf War, my Gulf War, it was a big Gulf War. Everybody had their own Gulf War. The one I was in was involved in stopping missiles from landing in Israel. That was my Gulf War. Yeah, I'm an American defending Americans' policy objectives, but the objective was to keep Israel out of the war, and you do that by stopping the missiles from landing. So indirectly, I was fighting for Israel during the Gulf War. And then my time as a weapons inspector was to keep those missiles from ever hitting Israel again. So I'm on the side of keeping Israel safe and secure. I don't want to create the conditions where Israel is subjected to attacks like what happened on October 17th. However, if you kick a hornet's nest long enough, the hornets are going to come out and sting you. And Israel doesn't have any right now to cry. Not after what I've read, not after what I've learned, after what I've seen. I've been blind, just like many Americans have. 2014 should have woken us up as to what Israel was doing in Gaza, but we bought into the Israeli mystique. 2020, 2020, 2021, it's a never-ending cycle of Israel taking a front and punishing the Palestinian people. And if you dig deep enough, you realize that this is done on purpose. There is a policy, the Dahiwa policy. Mowing the grass is the official policy of the Israeli state. What does mowing the grass mean? Mowing down the civilians. They don't care about civilians. They're going to bomb them. They're going to slaughter them to try and break the spirit, not of the terrorists, but of the civilians. They want the Palestinians to stop resisting Israeli occupation. If the founding fathers of America were like that, we'd have stopped resisting British tyranny and there wouldn't be an America. But the founding fathers said, no, tyranny must always be resisted. And we fought a revolution to liberate ourselves. Do you understand the psychology of the Palestinians? Occupied people, those in Gaza looking out, watching the Israelis occupy the land that their fathers owned, that their fathers tilled, their grandfathers. Many of their grandfathers were slaughtered by the Israelis to kick the Palestinians out, what they call the Nakba, the catastrophe. The more you dig, the more you realize that the Israeli position is indefensible. So I'm late to the game. I admit it. I'm late to the Palestinian cause, but I'm in with full feet. And I'm not doing this with, shallowness. I used to be a friend of Israel. I'm not an enemy of Israel. I don't wish harm on the Israeli people. But I will tell you this, I will never put Israeli interests over the interests of the Palestinian people ever again. I am Team Palestine until which time they are given the dignity that they deserve as a people who must have a nation that stands equal with the Israeli nation and all other nations in the community of nations in the world today.
That's really great to hear. And I love that, there's a lot of people in the world today that are, for whatever reason, too egotistical, too embarrassed to ever say, maybe I've learned more stuff, or maybe, I've changed my opinion on something, or maybe the way in which events are unfolding right now have caused me to not say, oh, I was wrong before, but I've just changed my mind. And now I see the what's happening. I mean, the level of war crimes taking place in Gaza each and every minute, I can't keep up with it. I'm trying to document it. And like you've been doing, the world needs to see what's happening. These little girls, little boys that are being slaughtered left and right. They're trying to hide it, but the world needs to see what's really happening. And I think a lot of people are beginning to wake up. And that's kind of my next question is, when it comes to the American population, when it comes to the global population, even like Israelis, I think it's 80% of Jewish Israelis now blame Netanyahu for this invasion of Israel. The majority of Americans don't support sending military, like unlimited military aid and weapons and all this stuff to Israel. It really seems like we're seeing a tidal shift in the sentiment of an otherwise usually really, pro-Israeli crowd in Western countries that are beginning to now take a more affirmative position, like we're seeing with Vladimir Putin, who are saying we need peace, we need a Palestinian state, and we need to respect what we've agreed on at the United Nations Security Council. So what is your take on that? And why do you think Why do you think this happened? Do you think that Netanyahu felt he was in a risky position, so he may have let this happen? Or do you think it was really a sleuthy operation by Hamas and probably the Iranians that caught the Israelis off their guard?
There's that old saying, and I could be getting this wrong, but pride goeth before the fall. Israel is a nation that's overwhelmed with arrogance, hubris, pride. It's literally the definition of a narcissist nation. I mean, again, I don't want to come off as anti-Semitic. I think I made it clear that I used to love Israel, and I still like Israel. There's still a place in my heart for Israel, and there always will be. But you can't sit there and say that we are anointed by God. We are the chosen by God. Therefore, we get to do anything we want. I'm not picking on your faith. If that's what you believe, that's what you believe. But guess what? No one else believes it. And we're not going to sit here and kowtow to your faith if it requires us to allow you to impose tyranny on other human beings. All men are created equal. If you're an American, reread these documents that are the founding documents of our nation, who we are, what we believe. All men are created equal. That means Jews are the equals of Muslims. Not if you talk to the Israelis, the modern day Israelis. Again, I have to differentiate. It was 1995, I think, when Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated, 1995, November. And, that Israel was a different Israel than exists today. I traveled to Israel quite a bit, and I went back in 2009, and I have to tell you, the Israel that existed in 2009 was a nation living in fear of the Muslims. They had built a wall, a literal wall, a ghetto wall, keeping the Palestinians out. That didn't exist when I was there before. They built a ghetto wall. It didn't make the Israelis safer. Every Israeli was quivering, shaking in fear of the fact that the world hated them, but they hated them with cause. Netanyahu is the man who killed Yitzhak Rabin. He didn't pull the trigger, but he was the opposition leader, and he was encouraging people to call Yitzhak Rabin a Nazi. He was encouraging these radical Jewish rabbis to put a certain edict. It's like the Jewish equivalent of a fatwa, a religious edict that says this man has betrayed Judaism. He can be killed. And he was killed by a right-wing, rabid Israeli Orthodox Jew who said, the rabbi told me to do it. God told me to do it. What replaced him was Benjamin Netanyahu, who's a lying sack of manure from day one. This is a man, look, I spent from 1994 to 1998 working with Israeli intelligence about Iraqi weapons of mass destruction. When I started, Iraq was the #1 threat to Israel. That's how they assessed it. By the time I finished, Iraq was number 6 and falling. Why? Because Israel had bought into the reality that not only was Iraq disarmed of weapons of mass destruction, and people say, why did you work with Israel, Scott? That's the reason why. You see, by working with Israel, I was able to get them to go, oh, maybe he's disarmed. Bingo, we win. Because if I didn't work with them, they would never believe he's disarmed. And I just told you, the United States will veto everything in the United Nations if Israel disagrees. We were getting Israel on the side of disarmament, and they had bought into it. We also got Israel to, there's another big one, to view Saddam Hussein as a rational actor. They were trying to kill him at the end of the Gulf War. They actually had assassination teams going in there. They did a dress rehearsal for a Sayat Matkal raid. That's their Delta Force. They were going to go in and kill Saddam at a funeral of his uncle. And they were rehearsing it, and had the rehearsal gone well, they would have done it. They would have killed Saddam. The rehearsal went bad. They fired live ammunition when it shouldn't have been. Guys died, got exposed. They canceled it, but now they were going, do we continue to try to kill him? And they called in a team of guys, and they said, let's reevaluate this. And they had a guy assume the role of Saddam and educate himself as if he were Saddam. And then we talked to people, and they came out and they said, Saddam's a rational actor. That if we actually disarm Iraq and then are willing to work with Iraq to build a better Middle East, we'll never be friends with Iraq, but he won't be an existential threat. We can move beyond Iraq with Saddam still at the helm. That's official Israeli policy. Netanyahu came in and flipped the whole script because that was inconvenient. He didn't like that. He's Mr. Security, and to be Mr. Security, you have to have a threat. So he revived the Saddam threat. And Benjamin Netanyahu, for all those people who are resentful about the WMD lies and the blood of American soldiers on the hands of George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, etc. Benjamin Netanyahu's hands are soaked in American blood because he's the guy that got them convinced. He's the guy that went and testified before Congress in 2002, knowing it's a lie. How do you know he knows it's a lie, Scott? Because I worked with Israeli intelligence from 1994 to 1998, and I know that they know what the truth was. But Benjamin Netanyahu testifies before the Congress and says there's absolute certainty they have a bomb, 100%, there's no doubt. And Congress went, yeah, we're going to invade. Boom, they didn't have a bomb. Everything Benjamin Netanyahu said is a lie. Everything he ever says is a lie. He's a liar. He's been lying. But guys, guess who built Hamas? Here's a good one for you. Israel. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu didn't do it because it was Israel backed Hamas back in the 1980s. But when Hamas was going to make that transition to being a terrorist group to being a governing agency, Benjamin Netanyahu is the one who did it. He said, if you want to split up the Palestinians, make sure lots of money gets sent to Hamas. Make sure we get Hamas elected. And they worked and they got Hamas elected. And then a civil war happened and Hamas won the civil war in Gaza. They got beat in the West Bank, but now Gaza becomes a Hamas super camp, courtesy of Benjamin Netanyahu. Everything that's happened since then is because of Benjamin Netanyahu. And now he comes back. He's one of the most corrupt people that ever walked the face of the earth. And he's facing corruption charges that would put him in jail for the rest of his life. So what does he do? He gets reelected as prime minister, and then he says, we're going to rewrite basic law. Israel doesn't have a constitution. Can't, because it's a Jewish homeland. And according to the, I could be getting this wrong, but the Torah, or Israel can't exist until the Messiah returns and the temple is rebuilt. So to call yourself the state of Israel today, there's a lot of Orthodox Jews out there saying that's heresy. Can't be a state of Israel. Therefore, there can't be a constitution. But there is basic law. And the basic laws of Israel provide for the same sort of separation of state that exists in the United States. You have the parliament, the Knesset, you have the executive, you have the president's the chief of state, but the prime minister's the most powerful part of the executive. And then you have the judiciary, which is supposed to be separate and independent from there. What Benjamin Netanyahu has done is taken advantage of the majority in the Likud to rewrite basic law so that his party and he personally controls the judiciary, that he can stack the deck with the judges so that he never gets prosecuted. And anybody who says we want to prosecute him, they impeach him. That's the whole thing. So if any judge went, yeah, well, I think I'm going to, all the judges right now, they're going after Donald Trump. Well, it's the prosecutors going to put the overseeing those cases. If this was Israel, they'd all be impeached. Mm-hmm. Ain't that beautiful? Ain't that wonderful? No, it isn't, ladies and gentlemen. It's not wonderful. The judiciary must be separate but equal. That's how it works. Netanyahu's done. Israel went bananas. Hundreds of thousands of people in the streets. Prior to the Hamas action, if you'd Googled Israel, it was all about how the Israeli people were rejecting Netanyahu, saying, you're out. We're done with you. Thousands of reservists said, we will never serve in the military, not under Benjamin Netanyahu. And then October 17th comes. Now, you asked the question, did Netanyahu orchestrate this? Well, we know he orchestrated because he created Hamas. He empowered Hamas. But no, I think what happened on October 17th. Go ahead. You have a question.
Quick question. Maybe you could address also. You've brought up the Hamas, the Israeli creation of Hamas a few times. And maybe you could also, if I don't know the full history, but I also am aware that Hamas was utilized against the Assad government to fight in some capacity with the moderate rebels, but they've been brought back under the axes of resistance fold with the Iranians over the past several years. Maybe you could touch, because I don't know that history.
Yeah, when Assad, when the whole Syrian civil unrest broke out in 2011, 2012, there's Palestinian refugee camps outside of Damascus. And inside those Palestinian refugee camps, there's a strong Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad presence. They are Sunni Arabs. And the Al-Qaeda element, this is pre-ISIS, but even ISIS, when they came in, are Sunni as well. The Islamists that were being empowered by Saudi Arabia, which is a Sunni country, pouring money in, Qatar, a Sunni country. It's sort of a Sunni revolt against an Alawite leader. Bashar al-Assad is an Alawite that's an offshoot of the Shia faith. It's the Shia don't necessarily recognize it as a genuine religion, but they've sort of, when this whole thing started, all the clerics got together in Iran and went, Alawites, okay, you're okay. Humdy to humdy humdy. You guys are all right. So we don't view you as heretics anymore. We can fight with you now. But the bottom line is this was a religious thing.
Okay.
But the Syrian government didn't collapse. They resisted. And then Hezbollah came in and fought alongside the Syrian government. Then the Iranians came in. Then the Russians came in. And everybody sort of went to Hamas and the Palestinian, the Islamic Jihad, and said, hey, knock it off. You see, you need us to survive, and we choose him over you. So if you want to continue to do your thing, you got to be on Team Bashar. And they changed their tune, and there was a coalescing of the minds, so to speak. And so they dropped out of the anti-Assad front, assumed a more neutral stance in Syria, and got back to the business of hating Israel above all else.
So I'm sorry I interrupted you. You were about to answer the question as to whether or not Netanyahu kind of preferred this invasion to take place in Israel with Hamas, or if it was a complete sleuth operation he wasn't even aware of. I'm not a conspiracy kind of guy. I think there's a lot of people out there frustrated with me because they're like, Scott, you told the truth about WMD. Yeah, but it wasn't a conspiracy. I was the chief weapons inspector. I knew the truth. So it was easier for me to tell the truth. I don't have to have a conspiracy about anything. But they're like, what about 9/11? I'm like, yeah, I'm not buying into that. Well, you're horrible. You're a horrible human being. You don't buy into the 9/11. No, I don't. I mean, hate me if you want to, but I don't. I'm not a conspiracy guy. I actually like to look at the facts and see where the facts take me. I'm a big Occam's razor kind of guy. The simplest answer is probably the right answer because I've dealt with governments enough. I've dealt with complex problems. And first of all, conspiracies require a lot of competence. They really do, especially the really detailed conspiracies. People have to be pretty darn good to pull this off. Governments aren't very good. They're full of incompetence. I've seen nothing but incompetence. I've seen lies. I've seen just absolute failure of character. That's what I believe in. Not that I believe in it, but I mean, when I look at this thing, I'm more likely to believe that the government is incompetent and fell asleep at the wheel than I am to believe that in the midst of the greatest political crisis an individual's ever had, where every day he's faced with being thrown out of office, going to jail, that Benjamin Netanyahu is capable of going home, putting on his tinfoil hat, going, all right, now, how do we conspire with Hamas to make this happen? No, Netanyahu is an old man under a lot of political pressure. And what happened is, his eye got off the ball. He's dealing with a fundamentally divided nation. They're getting ready to pull a stunt in the West Bank dealing with settlers that's going to disrupt everything. At the same time, he's trying to salvage himself through the Abrams Accord and the reconciliation of relations with Saudi Arabia. They're looking to Saudi Arabia, the normalization of relations. They see a big future in the Gulf Arab states where they've already opened up several embassies. That's the direction they're going. And they say, okay, what's going to happen on the West Bank could screw this all up. So we need to keep it tampered down. We're going to withdraw troops from Gaza because it's quiet in Gaza. And he turned around to his guys and said, hey, what's going on with Gaza, Hamas? And they went, look, we bribed them. What do you mean we bribed them? We gave them 20,000 work permits. And the 2 million people got 20,000 work permits. And now they're getting some shekels, baby. And they're happy. And we're working with Hamas about governing. And if we get them to govern and not do terrorism, we don't have to worry about that. They said, but what about, we got a bunch of Scott Ritter type individuals down there on the border who do intelligence for a business. And they're reporting back that Hamas is actually doing dry rehearsals of an assault on the kibbutz. Don't worry about it. Domestic political consumption. They're just firing guns so the people in Gaza say, oh, they're still there. What about the paraglider exercises that we saw? Don't worry about it. Not a big deal. What about the chatter and everything? No. Hamas isn't going to do it because they want to have, they want the shekels, baby. We bought them off with the 20,000 things. It's called the conception. And the conception in the Netanyahu government was that Hamas was so committed to peace and stability and governance because they assumed that Hamas was the same as the Palestinian Authority, which Israel bought off. Those other Palestinians that live on the West Bank in their huge mansions and they fly around first class and they live in 5-star hotels. And they take all the money that comes in to help the Palestinian people and they enrich themselves. These are the scum of the earth.
President Abbas and company. Fatah stopped being a resistance movement a long time ago. Now they're just a bunch of fat, overweight men who carry around AK-47s that their muscles can't even carry anymore, and they take money. That's what the Palestinian Authority is, and that's what the PLO has become. Hamas ain't that. These are real men. I'm not saying they're good men, but these are real men. You push them, there's steel there. There's muscle there. They're the resistance. And the Israelis convinced themselves that they could buy Hamas off like they bought the PLO off. It didn't work that way. And on October 17th, the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, the last time Israel had a conception, Egypt will never go across the Suez Canal because they know the consequences would be too harsh. Well, they went across the Suez Canal, caught you by surprise, killed a couple thousand Israelis. That's what happened on October 17th. Hamas executed one of the most well-conceived, well-rehearsed military operations in modern history. They deceived one of the greatest intelligence institutions in the world, the Israeli intelligence. They did this undetected, or if it was detected, they managed to convince the Israelis, because the Hamas is smart. They know about the conception. So what they tell the Israelis is, wait a minute, what do the Israelis want to hear? Because they had a drone over the combat village the other day. I think they saw us attacking the kibbutz. They might know we're coming. No, don't worry about it. Hey, Ali, yeah, you got a meeting with your Israeli counterpart? Yeah. Tell them you're desperate to get another 10,000 work permits. Tell them we really need it, that we're hurting here, that in order for us to move forward in this governance thing, we need more. And the Israelis are going, see, we told you. They bought into it. Didn't want to see no evil here soon. And as a result, Hamas pulled up. But here's the scary part. The mission that Hamas pulled off on October 17th, that doesn't mean that October 18th, they stopped planning. They've been doing this for 2 years, planning this. What they did was designed to enrage Israel. There's a reason why they did what they did. I'm not supporting it. I'm not condoning it. I condemn it. But there's a reason why. It was to get Israel so mad, so angry that two things would happen. One, when Hamas pulled back into the Gaza area, Israel will blow the living hell out of it. Excuse my language. Level the place, which they're doing right now. And Hamas knew that the world is going to rise up. Rise up. And it's happening right now. Everything that's happening around the world is part of the Hamas plan. It doesn't mean that it shouldn't happen. It should happen. People should be enraged. Israel's overreacting. To give you an example, overreacting. Remember that hospital they blew up the other night? Yes. All right. Killed a couple hundred people. The whole world's blown up about it. You know what they did today? They sent a message to that hospital, they being the Israelis, saying, get out. We're going to level the place. There's 13,000 people in that hospital. Israel says, if you don't get out on the time that we tell you, it's on you. We're going to kill everybody. Israel believes they can do that. So Hamas set Israel up for this. That's how stupid Netanyahu is. He doesn't understand that he's literally walking into the trap. There's that old saying that if the enemy, if everything's going according to plan, it's probably an ambush. And so they're doing it. The second thing is Hamas is prepared for this. They have easily 80 to 90 days worth of supplies underground. They know what a J dam does, how deep it penetrates. They've gone 15 meters deeper. J dams can't penetrate the tunnels. These tunnels are everywhere. They're full of ammunition, rockets, fuel, food, extra fighters. These guys are living in dormitories down there. What's happening above ground is hell on earth. You know who doesn't care about the Palestinian people, just like the Israelis? Hamas. They're willing to sacrifice them as well. They are literally sacrificial lambs designed to they're there to be killed by the Israelis, to enrage the world, and to slow down the Israeli assault, to complicate the Israeli assault. The Israelis are going to come into Gaza and they're going to get slaughtered because Hamas is waiting for them. Hamas has planned this battle. This will not go well for Israel. I'm not saying that they can't win, but there's a thing called a Pyrrhic victory. If you can go in, if they go in there and they end up defeating the Hamas military wing, understand that Hamas is an ideology. It's not just people. You're going to kill people, but because you've blown up the Palestinians, you've made the Hamas ideology immortal. It will never go away. There will always be a Hamas resistance. Israel doesn't understand that. They're going in there, but the price they're going to pay, they're going to lose thousands of soldiers dead. Thousands. They're also going to be responsible for the deaths of hundreds of hostages. That'll be on Israel. That'll be on Israel. And no matter what happens, Israel's going to come out of this entire tragic situation weaker than they entered it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I also agree with your analysis that this was a sleuth operation and Israel did not see it coming in the way that they should have. You know, it is really crazy to see them just walking into every single trap that's being set by Hamas. You brought up the point that Hamas doesn't necessarily care about what's happening above ground. The way I see it is Hamas views life quite simply. They would rather die trying to break free than to die living in a prison. And I think there's a lot of Palestinians who probably are just average non-Hamas members that feel the same way about this. And the crazy
but not
part
the children. But not the children.
Not well, and that's the thing.
50% of them are children.
44% are under the age of 14. Yeah. And that's what I was going to bring up next. It's when you look at the potential invasion that is probably going to happen with the IDF, the IDF has amassed 300,000 reservists in tandem with the several 100,000 fighters they already had. These reservists, from what I've understood from primary sources, are not well trained. These are not battle-tested men. These are men who are being called up from wherever they are on the face of the earth to come fight in Israel for maybe something they don't feel all that deeply about, that patriotic about, against Hamas and probably every military age man above the age of 16 in Palestine who's going to be picking up an arm, if they have enough, to go fight against the IDF. So, like you said, it's probably not going to go well for Israel. There usually have been a casualty phobic sort of military. I don't really know how much they're willing to sacrifice here. But the broader question that I think looms is not necessarily how is the IDF going to hold against Hamas, but what happens if Hezbollah or Iran or whoever else, Turkey, who knows, gets involved in this? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it could, the likelihood of this potentially sparking something much bigger that's not just Hamas?
100%. Look, I think the reason why Joe Biden went to Israel wasn't for wasn't to dox Delta. I think you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Wasn't to, to kiss Benjamin Netanyahu on the lips. He gave a behind the scenes discussion to the Israelis that said, hey guys, we deployed 2 aircraft carriers and a Marine amphibious ready group, but and we moved some squadrons around, but that ain't going to beat Iran. All right. We don't want to go to war with Iran because a war with Iran will be devastating to not just you, but to us, because whatever harm we do on Iran, they're going to do on global energy supplies, and the global economy is going to collapse. And I'm Joe Biden and I'm running for president in 2024, and I ain't going to get reelected if I'm alive at that time with having an American economy collapse because I decided to support you to go into Gaza to kill people. The Americans need to understand the following. We're getting ready to get into an apocalyptic war with Iran. Why? Because Israel is going into Gaza to murder Palestinians. Americans are going to die because Israel is going into Gaza to murder Palestinians. That's not an existential issue for America, and it's not even an existential issue for Israel. Israel's survival actually is enhanced by not going into Gaza. But Israel is going to go into Gaza. They're going to trigger a Hezbollah response. And let me just break it down for you. You know this Iron Dome that you've been watching? I mean, it's a pretty cool show. Hamas fires these old rockets. They sort of slowly rise into the sky. And then the Israelis send the song and dance team, because they got the cool rockets. They go up and they move and they spin and they dance and they talk to each other and each one pick one out and there's pop, 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 pop. And it's very entertaining until the one or two they didn't hit coming in hit. But it's also very expensive. And Hamas just keeps firing these rockets that cost $200. And Israel keeps firing rockets that cost $2 million. Now, I'm simple Marine. Math isn't my thing. But I can tell you right now that 200 goes into 2 million a lot of times, meaning that it's easier to build cheap rockets. So Israel is running out of the Iron Dome rockets. They called up America, their good friend and their co-developer. They said, please send us, my dogs, probably a FedEx guy at my door, or the police knocking it down to tell me to stop putting down Israel. But no, I apologize for that. There's
Oh,
not
you're
much
good.
to do about this. But come on, buddy. He's a killer. Israel could use him in Gaza, or the Palestinians could use him in Gaza. But
I can still hear you. You're good.
Sam, if you could go away, please, so the dog be quiet. Thanks. Somebody came in the house, and the dog doesn't like him very much. So that's what's happening here. Anyways, now that the dog has calmed down, they called up America and said, could you send us more rockets? Send us everything you got. So we did. I think it was 360. That's it. We don't have any more. We're out.
Wow.
Hamas still is firing rockets. Israel is running out of rockets. If Hezbollah comes in, they have 100,000 rockets. And these aren't little bottle rockets. These are the real deal. What Iran's been doing, you know, Israel's been bombing Syria now for some time now. You've been following that. Okay, one of the main reasons why they bomb Syria is they're trying to interdict the precision-guided technology coming in for Hezbollah's rockets. The Hezbollah's forces right now can fire tens of thousands of rockets that can hit within a meter of their intended target. For instance, they've published maps that say this is where the prime minister's residence is. And they said, look at that window. We're going in that window. And they will. And they published all the maps. They know where all the airplanes are parked. They know where everything. There's 10,000 points of impact they're going to hit. They can't be stopped by Israel. Even if they had the Iron Dome is meant for bottle rockets, not for real rockets. B, they won't have enough missiles even if it worked. And when this happens, Israel will disappear, literally be wiped off the face of the earth. It'll turn into Gaza. Then what happens is Hezbollah comes in with 100,000 troops. They have a plan where they're literally going to occupy northern Israel up to the Sea of Galilee and reconquer the Golan Heights. Yeah. This will happen. Israel can't stop. Israel's run two major exercises. One last year called Chariots of Fire. One this year called Firm Hand, I think it was called. And it was a stress test of the Israeli system. Basically, can Israel fight on all fronts at the same time? And the answer was a resounding no. They need America. And Joe Biden went there to tell them, hey, we'd like to be with you, but we can't do it either. We're stressed out. We got this whole Russia thing going. We got 100,000 guys in Europe. We don't have any more to give Europe, and Europe's in trouble. We're talking about China and Taiwan. We ain't got enough there. And now you are talking about a major war against Iran. We definitely don't have enough there. You need to calm down. And Israel, I think, just told America to pound sand. Some friend they are. So, you know, that's where we're at. This is a very dangerous situation. A very dangerous. We have 2 aircraft carriers off the coast of Lebanon right now. Russia looked at that and said, you know, we got Russian forces in Syria. We view this as a threat. So we put Russia, MiG-31s, over the Black Sea with Kinzhal missiles. Those Kinzhals will sink an aircraft carrier. Nothing the aircraft carrier can do to stop it. So it's checkmate. America isn't the superpower we once were. There's a limit to our military power. Our military is fundamentally broken. Ask the U.S. Army recruiters how'd they do last year. They're 6,000 short. U.S. Congress is saying in order for us to be a superpower again, we have to be able to fight 2 wars simultaneously. That means we're going to have to build up a force of another 150,000 ground troops. We can't recruit 60,000 to meet the current recruiting goals. What makes you think we're going to do that? America is fundamentally broken when it comes to its military. Fundamentally broken.
You mentioned Russia. I want to address that probably for our last question here before we part ways. Thank you for all the time you've spent here. There's obviously a lot going on related to Russia and Israel in Gaza. Putin called for the establishment of a Palestinian state. Putin is delivering 27 tons of humanitarian aid to Gaza. God bless him. And you just mentioned the MiG positioning with regard to the U.S. naval fleet. But I want to talk about the thing that has been the primary focus for everyone covering geopolitics and military for the past year and a half, almost 2 years now, which is the war in Ukraine. As we all know, Russia has about over 80, I think it's 87,000 square kilometers of territory, of Ukrainian territory that they've gained. But there's really, really big developments that are taking place this week under the cover of all the news that's been rising to the surface about Israel and Gaza. And that is two things. Russia is apparently moving on the offensive after the failed Ukrainian counteroffensive, and they're moving forward in the Kupiansk direction, which was the administrative hub of the Kharkov Oblast when Russia controlled it prior to the Ukrainian counteroffensive last year, and also in the direction of Avdiivka. So could you touch on this, give us an update about the Russian offensive and the SMO in Ukraine?
Sure. I mean, let's work from the south to the north. Before we get to Avdiivka, we'll go down to the Robotyno battle, where, you know, that was where the Ukrainians had said last December, if you remember, General Zaluzhny, I'm sorry, had an interview with The Economist, and he said, "I can beat these guys," meaning the Russians, "but you got to give me, 300 tanks, 500 infantry fighting vehicles, 500 artillery pieces, unlimited ammunition. You give me that, I can beat them. I'm going to march right through Robotyno, go to Tokmak, and then I'm going to occupy Melitopol, split the land bridge, and I win the war." And the Russians are going, "Really? That's curious, but thanks for telling us where you're coming." And they brought this guy out of the academy named Romanchuk. And he's the guy, the genius, the Russian defensive genius. He designed the defense, and then they put him in charge of the defense. It's a multi-layered defense. Long story short, Ukraine built 12 brigades. They burned all 12 out. They never cracked the first line of defense. And the first line of defense was meant to be cracked. So was the second line. The whole idea of the Russian defense is a defense in depth to receive the attack, weaken it, and then when it gets to the third line, hold firm, surround, kill. They never cracked the first line, and they're done. They've used all of their strategic reserves. They're done. Now, what the Russians did for that by fighting this battle and eating up the reserves, Ukraine's got nothing left. So at Avdiivka, the Russians went on the counter. Now, Avdiivka is one of the most heavily fortified areas in the world. It's the centerpiece of the Ukrainian presence in Donetsk. From Avdiivka, the Ukrainians shelled Donetsk, the city, every day, killing innocent, citizens of Donetsk. The Russians hate it, but it's such a tough nut to crack, almost impossible. Well, Russia's gone on the offensive, and they've done something interesting, and it's fun to watch this play out in the news amongst the professional military analysts that apparently spring up everywhere. You see, the Russians attacked. They pin the Ukrainians down in the southern. They hit them with a northern flank. They go up and they take this thing called the slag heap, where it's a dominating position. It's old mining town. That's where all the leftovers from the mines build up, a big built up area. They're on top. They can control the fire, and they leave this road going in and out. And everybody's going, "Well, the Russians didn't get that road. They didn't close the gap, so they are losers." And I interviewed look, I was one of the guys going, "Why aren't they closing the cauldron? Why aren't they closing the cauldron?" So I talked to a Russian colonel who spends a lot of time. He was just in Avdiivka. He wouldn't tell me everything was on the maps for obvious reasons, but he said, "Look, understand this. If you close the gap, you surround them. One, the guys on the inside are desperate. So they're going to be attacking with all they got to try and break through, while on the other side, guys are going to be trying to attack to break through to them. And all you've done is put yourself in the middle. You've become the walnut in a nutcracker. So we don't want to be the walnut in the nutcracker. So what we do is we create a situation where we control the line of communication. The guys inside, now we're going to pound them to death. And they have a choice now. They can leave or stay and die. If they want to be reinforced, the reinforcements have to come through the gauntlet, and we blow them all up. And meanwhile, we begin steady pressure going through the city. It's Bakhmut. It's what happened in Bakhmut. The Russians ended up taking Bakhmut. They're going to take Avdiivka because they've got a plan to do that. Now, you move up to Kupiansk. You said something very important. You said it's the administrative hub of the Kharkov Oblast. The colonel that I talked to said, "You do know that Kupiansk was quiet." He said, "You want to know why it was quiet?" And I said, "I'd like to know why it was quiet." And he said, "Because it's Ukrainian territory. And we're not here to conquer Ukraine. We had to hold on to this land to protect the northern borders of Lugansk while we are reoccupying the Russian territories, but we'll give it back. We don't want it. Except now that Ukraine's refused to surrender and they've started attacking." Okay, so Vladimir Putin made the decision to go on the offensive at Kupiansk. And he says, when that decision's made, that means we're taking Kharkov. And that's an important thing. And if they're taking Kharkov, remember Medvedev said there's 5 territories that are going to fall. I think this war has hit one of those pivot points. And Kupiansk are doing the exact same thing they're doing in Advika. They blew up all the bridges over this river. So the Ukrainian forces that were lumped in there's like 15,000 of them. They can't retreat except through one little road. And they've done the same thing. They've advanced around them, surrounded them with an almost encirclement, but they've left that escape route in. But it's also a route where reinforcements can come in. And the end result is it's another meat grinder operation, and Russia's slaughtering them. And then when that falls, what you're going to see when Advika and Kupiansk fall, and they will fall, there will be a general collapse of the Ukrainian defenses because they won't have enough troops to man their lines. And you're going to see this precipitous withdrawal behind the Dnieper River. And then Russia is going to be in a position to pivot and go to Odessa if they want to. But this war has taken on a fundamentally different character. Now, you wouldn't know it if you read AOL or Newsweek magazine or Time magazine or Wall Street Journal or anything else. Apparently Ukraine's winning the war. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you right now, Ukraine ain't winning the war. They haven't been winning the war. They're not going to win the war. This war, the entire initiatives on the part. And again, I don't know. Jackson, you were just in Russia. I'll tell you what I saw in Russia, and you tell me. I saw a deeply patriotic nation, a deeply patriotic nation. I wish Americans were half as patriotic for America as the Russians are for Russia. They embarrassed me how patriotic they are. May 9th, I was there for May 9th, Victory Day. Wow. It's a real holiday. It's a holiday that people cry, literally cry for the love of their country. I've been around a lot of 4th of Julys. There's only one that I was at where people cried, and that was 1976 when we were in Ankara, Turkey, and the Turks allowed us to raise the American flag after denying us that right for a couple of years because we sanctioned Turkey. When that flag went up and they played the Star Spangled Banner, every American in the audience was bawling their eyes out because we were so proud of being American that day. But today I go to these 4th of July celebrations. It's just another party. It's just another hot dog eating contest. It's just another thing. We lost what it meant to be an American. We don't celebrate being American more. And if we do, it's so superficial. So superficial. There ain't nothing superficial about the Russians. When they say they look up in the sky and they see 27 million sets of eyeballs staring down at them, the relatives who lost their lives in the Great Patriotic War, holding them to account for their actions, and they live every day not wanting to disappoint these people, they mean it. They mean it. They're sincere. This is a nation of patriots, and there is no quit in them. Are they perfect? Hell no. No one's perfect. And the Russians damn sure aren't perfect. But they got a great history. They have a great language. They have a great culture. They have a religion that, again, I'm not that religious, but I respect their faith, the fact that they are faithful. If we think that these people have quit in them, if we think that they're going to back down because Joe Biden gave a speech where he said we're at an inflective moment in American history. If you think Vladimir Putin suddenly woke up and was shaking in fear and the Russian people said, Vlad, you got to stop doing what you're doing because Joe Biden says we're at an inflective point in American history, you don't know the Russians. They don't want to go to war with us. Not at all. They want to live in peace. They really do. But there ain't no backing down on them. And if we think they're going to back down, if we keep pushing them, we're going to find out the hard way why, the lessons that Napoleon learned, the lessons that Hitler learned, and there'll be lessons that we're going to learn if we keep pushing them too far. I don't know. That's my opinion. What do you think?
I 100% agree. The further that we push them, the worse it's going to be for us. The individual who I met, who was the most, agreed with us, what we say about, or at least what I say, I'm very pro-Russian in this SMO, and I wholly stand by them. I'm 100% with them. The guy I met who was the most ardently pro-Russia that you could ever imagine and truly believed in the mission of liberation of all these people in Ukraine that are suffering under the Nazis. Guess what? He's a veteran, and his nephew was killed a few months ago in the SMO and has a 1-year-old child and a widow that he leaves behind now. And out of everyone I met in Russia, everyone I talked to, went to RT, went to Russia One, went to everywhere, was talking to a bunch of people. And I asked a lot, I wasn't annoying, but I asked, people when it came up about the SMO and their opinions on it. Out of everyone I met, the guy that was most committed to it all was the man who's lost the most out of anyone I met from it. So the more we continue to push Russia, the more sanctions, the more we continue to insult their culture. We try to wipe away their culture. We wipe away their young men in Ukraine and young Ukrainian men that are being sent off to the front. The bigger this problem is going to become. And that's why we need to push for peace here. We need to push for peace in Gaza, though I don't think that's within Biden's control, the weak leader that he is at this point. And the world is at war, and it is changing. And I'm glad that we have a walking encyclopedia like yourself to come on and talk about these subjects and inform us all. So thank you so much for joining me here today. Where can people follow along with your work? You're back on YouTube, correct?
For the moment. we'll find out.
Good.
My positions on Israel aren't very popular, so we'll see. No, but I have a website, ScottRitterExtra.com, and if you go to that website, my Substack is there. Everything I do on the different podcasts, my own podcasts, ones that I'm guest on, is all there. There's no paywall, so it's accessible. If you want to donate, if you want to subscribe, that's up to you, but I don't make it a requirement. My mission right now is to engage in debate, dialogue, and discussion in order to have a better informed American audience, and that's where you can go, ScottRitterExtra.com. It's all there. I'm in the process of finishing a movie
Wow.
about my trip to Russia, a documentary film called Waging Peace. Documentaries aren't free, so if anybody's inclined to help support that, there is a special button there, wagingpeace.fund, and you can support the film. But again, there's no requirement. You can go there and access everything free of charge.
Very cool. Well, I'll look out for the movie when it's coming out, and all your other work. So, Scott, thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jackson.
All right, how's it going, everybody?